seeing some of those same students that I met as either 11th graders or 12th graders now going through their experience at William Patterson and graduating and seeing them walk across the stage at commencement, that was at that point, again, my kind of aha moment to saying, this is why I do the work that I do. This is why I love it so much. And it's because being able to see those students fulfill their destiny and get to that particular point, same as I had, and doing it in grand fashion was extremely fulfilling.
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Tiers from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission of Mission podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission of Mission is part of the Enrollify podcast network. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversation, so let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 20 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Today I'm joined by one of the most incredible humans on the planet, Mr. Carlos Cano. Whenever Carlos's name comes up in admissions and EM circles, a lot of people, myself included, use words like genuine, caring, determined, and passionate. CC is just an amazing human being, and also if you're ever playing trivia and the category is useless WWE or WWF wrestling knowledge, Carlos is 100% your go-to person on that. So welcome to the show, CC.
Thank you so much, JT. It's so great to be here. Such an honor that you asked me to come on with you. And absolutely, useless trivia, period. I'm your guy. My wife and I are always thinking, we need to find the local trivia in town and join it, because the two of us tag team for trivia would be a great tandem. But again, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Love it. And I'm excited to unpackage a bunch of stuff because you've been in higher ed now for double-digit years. And we know the old mantra, which is you make it past that 2.5, 3 year mark, you're usually, quote unquote, in it for life. So think back, CC, you're a student at William Patterson University in Wayne, New Jersey in the early 2000s. And you not only get involved in the student ambassador program, but you also eventually become an RA. You graduate, and then in 2010, the admission profession comes calling and you start working at your alma mater as a counselor. Like, what was it that drew you to that opportunity?
I think back and I remember a time where a vice president of enrollment at the time was asking me as an upperclassman, Carlos, what are you going to do when you graduate? And my response really was, I'm not really thinking about graduation because I'm just having such a fulfilling experience as an undergraduate student. I was an RA, I was an orientation leader. I did anything and everything I could. And I wasn't really thinking about graduation. I really thought I would graduate, find a job, and kind of do it the real easy way. That vice president at the time said to me, well, if you really like this environment in higher education and admissions and enrollment, you can work in higher education. And that was my aha moment. I had never really thought of it that way. So when I graduate, there isn't anything immediate in admissions, higher education at the time. So I grew up training in the martial arts. And so for about a year or so, I was running a school for my grandmaster, my teacher, during that time. And finally, one of my former supervisors at William Patterson while I was a student calls me and says, Carlos, we have an opening. You need to apply. And at that point, again, from there, the rest is history. And I fell in love with it. And that's why 13 years later, here I am still doing what I do and absolutely loving every second of it.
What'd you fall in love with, right? Because everybody says some version of that. Oh, it's fulfilling. It's like, what is it though? Or what was it for you initially?
For me, initially, especially when going back to my alma mater, that's what had me fall in love with it. I tell students all the time, I now work at Georgian Court University, my third institution, but I always go back to my story at William Patterson. And I tell people that I bleed orange and black, and I really do. I'm a first generation student, grew up in Jersey City. And so the idea for me was, And how I was brought up was get your education, go get a job, work hard, and you'll be successful. And my family was able to put me in all the right positions to be able to do that. And so I fell in love with, in 2010, being able to represent my alma mater, which I've always had an affinity to, being able to talk to students that were about to go on a similar journey that I did, particularly as first generation Latino, and all the different check boxes, right, that I sort of checked off. And those were the students that I was seeing and that I was able to engage with. And so that's really what drew me in and what keeps me drawn in. Again, 13 years later, even in my current role now, I still recruit, albeit I don't recruit the same way I did when I first started, nor the territory, but it is still what keeps me grounded in the work, what keeps me honest, and what keeps me passionate about the work that I do.
Was there ever a time in those first couple of years when you were at WP, Carlos, that you were just like, I don't know, man, this may not be for me. I think I may need to go. I mean, help me understand, because everybody, I feel like, goes through some version of that. And I always wonder, okay, number one, was there that moment for you? And if there was, what led you to ultimately say, no, I think I'm going to stick it out? And if it wasn't, why do you think that was?
I have to be honest in that it never really did. And I think for me, it was, again, it was being able to work at my alma mater, being able to tell my story, because it came so easy to me. It was very organic, and very authentic. And I felt that always resonated with people the most, was the fact that I was able to tell my story, and I felt like people actually were hearing what I was saying, and they were utilizing that as, whether as inspiration or as a way to be able to say, if Carlos did it, then I can do it too. And that's how I always felt like I was trying to connect with students and families, was that if I did it, then you all can do it too. And so for me, it was the grind too. I've always loved recruitment and travel, and seeing through the process on an annual basis in admissions, going through recruitment, going through reading season, which is probably not my favorite part of the work, but I understand obviously where it comes into play. And then getting through to seeing a student make that decision to go to wherever it is that they end up, in terms of where I've been working. And then I guess kind of looking beyond that, once I got to the point where I was in about 4 or 5 years and I was still at William Patterson, and then seeing some of those same students that I met as either 11th graders or 12th graders now going through their experience at William Patterson and graduating, and seeing them walk across the stage at commencement, that was, at that point, again, my kind of aha moment to saying, this is why I do the work that I do. This is why I love it so much. And it's because being able to see those students fulfill their destiny and get to that particular point, same as I had, and doing it in grand fashion, was extremely fulfilling.
So then why do you think, because again, you're now in a leadership role, which we'll get to here in a little bit, but why do you think, CC, so many young admissions professionals aren't lasting more than a year and a half, 2 years even? Now, is it a leadership thing? Is it a, you know what, I'm not at my alma mater, I don't have that same pull you're talking about, or I never make it to 4 years to be able to see some of these students that I ultimately am able to work with graduate? Just any initial thoughts on what you think, whether it's a combination of those things or something completely different?
It's a combination of all those things. Obviously, I think the most obvious answer, of course, is what we've been through in the last 3 to 5 years with the pandemic, and how that has changed, I think, the concept of work, period, in terms of working from home, remote work, hybrid work, whatever it is that you want to call it. And so I think that has played a role in it. I also think that there is the concept of instant gratification for the generation that's currently graduating and going into the workforce. And I think the reality is that in admissions, specifically in an enrollment and recruitment, there isn't necessarily a lot of that instant gratification. It is grinding, it is taxing, so it does take a little bit of time. to reap the benefits and to see some of the work that you're doing fulfilled. And so that's one of the things that in my role now, I try to give our counselors the perspective of the grind is worth it. The work that you're doing is worth it. You may not see it today, you may not see it tomorrow or next month or even within the year, but you will see it, and you need to give it the opportunity to cultivate.
Alrighty, we're gonna play a game, guys. Okay, so first and foremost, get a pen, get a paper, pull out your notes app on your phone, whatever it might be. Okay, got it? Great. All right, what keywords does your website currently rank for? Take a couple seconds, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I give you a few, not just a couple. What doesn't it rank for that you think it should rank for? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what are a few keyword opportunities that you could be winning on if you just simply tweaked some of your existing website copy? Got it? Okay, how'd you do? Ooh, not so hot. Not sure what you're currently ranking for, or not sure what you could be ranking for. Well, that's okay, because our friends at DD Agency want to help you answer all of these questions. DD Agency is a higher ed specific marketing technology agency that has conducted countless SEO audits for colleges and universities across the country. In these audits, they detail where you currently rank, what you could be ranking for, exactly how copy should be tweaked on website pages, and so much more. If this sounds like something that you could benefit from, give the guys at DD Agency a ping and be sure to mention that Enrollify sent you to claim a 10% discount on any of their SEO offerings. So head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO. That's DDA as in DD Agency, SEO, or simply follow the link in the show notes below. That will guarantee you get a 10% discount off of your audit. All right, head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO, or simply Google DD Agency, find DD Agency's website, and be sure to mention that you heard about them through Enrollify when you request your audit. All right, folks, back to the show.
Did people tell you that in leadership roles when you were in year 1 and year 2?
Absolutely. They most certainly did. And I took them at their word, because these were people that I trusted, and people that I felt were really mentoring me because they saw something in me. One of my mentors at William Patterson was someone that I had met during my recruitment process to William Patterson. Anthony Leckie, shouts out to him, who has known me for a very long time and really saw something in me, even if I didn't see it in myself a lot of the times. But he stuck with me, and really saw me through, going within that. And so he was the one that would always remind me, like, this isn't something that you're going to see necessarily the rewards of the work in such a small time frame. It takes time, but you will get there. And he was 100% right.
If you're listening to this and you haven't defined your why, I encourage you to think about that. But if you're a leader listening to this, really think about how often you have those type of conversations that Carlos just talked about with your staff. CC, I got to believe, though, you, like everybody else, because I deal with it too. I don't think any of us are immune to it, right? How do you deal with anxiety and just the mental health challenges that come from working in this profession? What do you do?
I find a lot of comfort, first and foremost, in my family. Proud husband, girl dad. I know you are too, JT, and I know how much pride and comfort that is certainly to bring you as well. And so I find a lot of comfort in spending time with them and unwinding and unraveling. I remember a couple weeks ago, I was working on a project, and my daughter happened to be home, from school. It was in the later afternoon, and she came in, and I was kind of juggling with it. I honestly don't remember exactly what it was, but I was kind of tossing ideas around, and I had been chatting with someone, and she came in and I didn't ask her for it, but it was totally fine. Gave me her perspective, and I was just like, sure, I never thought of it that way, right? Like, she's 13 years old. I recognize that very shortly I will be recruiting her friends, to the college, university, to higher education. But that moment and the fact that she helped me, which is great, but just kind of having that moment with her just reminds me constantly of how supportive my wife and daughter are of the work that I do. Beyond that, particularly from stemming from work from home and the pandemic, I've found a lot of comfort as well in just getting outside and going on walks, sitting down at the park and just breathing some fresh air, listening to something, whether, in my earbuds or something along those lines. And I guess more just recreationally, I love to game. So I'm always on my PS5 when I'm not doing anything family related or work related. And like you alluded to earlier, I am a huge wrestling fan. I'm a huge sports fan. So I'm either listening to sports talk radio or sports talk podcasts or wrestling podcasts. And those things allow me to unwind and disconnect a little bit. Those are the things that also allow me the opportunity to get away from something that I may not be really being super effective with in the moment. Take maybe couple minutes, an hour, even the rest of the day to kind of decompress and then come back to it fresh at a different point in time. So it's something that we all face and something that I think it's important to really do some self-reflection and identify those ways to be able to disconnect for a bit, decompress, and come back at it with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective.
Totally agree. And I either tweeted or put this on LinkedIn yesterday. I can't remember which one. I continue to get lots of questions around that, especially this time of year. And people CC will say to me, well, Jeremy, I can't afford the time to, just take a day off or to take up. And I'm like, you can't afford not to. Like for your mental health and your own sanity, right? Like none of us is immune to it. Were you able to power through a little bit more if you're self-motivated, you have an amazing boss? Of course, right? But like, we all need it. And if you're listening to this again in April and you're feeling completely overwhelmed, please, whether it's 20 minutes, an hour, a day, whatever you can afford to do not wait until post May 1 to do it. Carlos, what advice would you then give to somebody who maybe is at a turning point in their career right now, meaning they've been in higher ed, whether it's 12 months, 24 months, or maybe, you know what? They're like you were at 5 or 6 years, but they're not 100% certain. Do I want to go into leadership? Do I want to do this? Like, what advice would you give someone who's having that debate right now in their mind?
You alluded to this earlier, and it's finding your why. I've watched that clip on YouTube more times than I don't even care that I admit it. I do watch it very frequently because it's very powerful. What I would say to someone, and this is a conversation that I've certainly had with folks who have approached me with that same question: is it time to move on? I'm feeling this way, and that's usually my first response. And most of the time, I get a little bit of the confused look because it's like, what does that mean? Like, what am I looking for? That's why I'm asking you, right? What am I looking for? And I think I would say beyond that is if you're finding yourself in that consistent kind of rut or funk, maybe it goes on for a day, a week, a month, or even a year, then maybe, yeah, it is time to start considering what might be next. But what I caution people about the most is just because you're feeling some kind of way about it right now is not a reason to make a rash decision about what you might do tomorrow or even 2 days after or even a week after, right? You have to, like I said, be able to disconnect from that situation or from that circumstance, even if it's for a couple of moments or a couple of minutes or whatever the case may be, and really do that reflection. And if you find yourself in that consistent kind of moment where you're really not sure, you're really questioning it, you don't really see the benefits, then again, maybe it's time to start taking those opportunities to reflect, do that self-reflection, but also do that reflection with other people that know you well, that you feel comfortable having those conversations with, and people that you know that are going to tell you not what you want to hear, but that they're going to tell you what you may need to hear, which you may or may not like, but that they're actually going to tell you what it is that you need to hear. And you also need to be ready to take that too. So it works both ways. But that's certainly the way that I would approach it when it comes to thinking about, do I make this move? Do I not make this move? Am I good here? Those are definitely the right questions to ask. And I think it's important to be able to answer those honestly.
When you hit on earlier this concept of time and how when you started in the profession, it was like, Carlos, you got to give it time. You got to trust me. It's going to pay off. And there becomes a point for all of us where, sure, if we've given it time, to your point, maybe it's just not right for us. But I feel like the younger generation, and by younger, I don't only mean our daughter's age, right? Because, they're both 13. I have a 13-year-old daughter, as my listeners know. But even 22, 23-year-old admissions counselors, I get asked all the time, well, Jeremy, I have to do this. I'm like, says who? Like, if you're 27 and 28 and still trying to figure this out, do you realize how young you still are? And they kind of give me that weird look like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I started doing what I'm doing when I was 38. I'm now 47. And if I had to pivot again tomorrow, because to your point, I don't feel connected anymore. I don't feel fulfilled. I feel like it wouldn't be a problem at all, even though jokingly my daughter tells my wife and I all the time, right? You guys are old. You grew up in the 1900s. Like literally that's the phrase she uses. And we laugh about it all the time. I didn't have this concept of time figured out either. I think, CC, when we were in our 20s. So Carlos, we fast forward 7 years. And in 2017, you decide to pivot to what you're doing now, which is the enrollment communications world. Why'd you do that?
Because someone believed in me and someone gave me that opportunity. And it was kind of a two-pronged decision. It was, I want to do this. It was the right time. Like we just said, it was the right time for me to make that decision.
But how did you know that, right? You got tired of the work, or what was it on the admission side?
No, so personally, at William Patterson, I had kind of reached that proverbial glass ceiling where for any number of reasons, I wasn't going to get beyond where I was from a title standpoint. And from a responsibility standpoint. I was still loving the work that I was doing, but I had reached kind of that ceiling at that time, given where I was. And so another mentor of mine, Rohan Howell, who was my director for a couple of years at William Patterson and then went to SUNY Maritime, which is where I ended up in that role in 2017, going to more the communication side, again, gave me the opportunity and believed in me, went through a process, of course. And he's always been someone that I know will never sugarcoat anything and will always go about it in the right way. And so I knew that if he was going through this process and seeking out other candidates and whatnot, but he ultimately felt that I was the best person for the job. And so that I was going to do it. And at that point in my life, I was just married. I had just gotten married. So I'd been married for a little over a year. And it was the right time. It was the right time to make the flip. It was difficult. It was very bittersweet, obviously leaving my alma mater to go somewhere new. I had been at William Patterson for 7 years. And so there was that just kind of, okay, I've been here for so long. What's it like to be new somewhere again and to go through that transition? But again, because I knew who I was going to be working with, I felt very comfortable making that choice. Specifically going to enrollment marketing and enrollment communications. During my time at William Patterson, organically, I had gotten into social media on my own, leveraging the work that I was doing, leveraging William Patterson University. And I took the dive into Facebook and Twitter and not Instagram at the time. That would come a little later, but definitely on Twitter specifically. And that opened a number of doors and opportunities. But I think it was my ability to be able to storytell. And when I went to Maritime, that was something that they needed at that time, was someone who could convey the story of Maritime College and what it is and what the potential was there for students beyond the cover, right? So again, being able to tell the story, You don't want to judge the book by its cover. How do you get someone to open that proverbial book to be able to look into it further?
What's the biggest thing that most admissions professionals, CC, don't understand about the enrollment comms world?
That's a very good question. I think that the most common misconception is that enrollment marketing, or even just higher ed marketing in general, is only about being able to slap a billboard somewhere that has your institution's name and something catchy to draw the eye and fun colors and images and whatnot. And that's all you really do, right? You try to do that, maybe strategically, maybe not, but that's really kind of all it is. And while that's a very small piece of it, it is much more than that. It is, again, how you communicate with students, how you talk to them, how you talk with their parents, what you're saying to them. And then also, again, the ability to be able to tell a story with the information from your institution, with the information that you have on your students and your audience. But the other thing that I also remind counselors of, which is why I still love working with admissions counselors, and I still recruit as a part of my role. I still recruit students and do the college fair thing and get in the car for a couple of weeks and do all of that. But enrollment marketing and communications is also the conversations that you're having with prospective students and their families. And I remind our admissions counselors all the time that even though I'm the director of admissions communications and marketing, you all are my front line. So I have to also be able to provide you with the tools and the resources that you need to be able to tell that story, to be able to provide the information that people are looking for. But beyond that, it's also being able to teach these admissions counselors and other folks in general across campus, be able to teach them really what it means to actively listen and not information dump. That's always been one of my biggest pet peeves. But one of the things that I picked up during my time as an undergraduate student was the concept of active listening, and how important it is to be able to take the information that you're given when you pose a question and then be able to really turn it into the answer that that student, that the person that's in front of you is really looking for, and not going off on a tangent just because you have all this wealth of information. Full circle, that is ultimately what I think is that common misconception, is that the admissions common enrollment world is just sending out canned responses and canned emails and putting up a couple billboards or digital displays on Facebook. It's a lot more than that, and it does involve the interpersonal piece as well. It's funny because I had an admission counselor recently tell me that a student and their family were, beyond anything else, were just impressed with the fact that out of everyone that they had spoken to at an event, our admissions counselor remembered what they were looking to study, what they were interested in, all of these little details that they had just from having a conversation. And they had said to her, you know, out of everyone that we spoke to, you're the only one that remembered. And they were telling their student, this is the school you should go to, just because she remembered who you were and no one else was able to. Uh, it's become more and more apparent and consistent that students are looking for that beyond anything else, because we know everything else is more or less obvious. You don't take it for granted, but it's obvious. They're looking to higher education because they want an education, they want an experience, but beyond that, they want to feel that authentic, organic feeling that you know them, that you know who they are, that you know what buttons to push, what makes them tick.
Relationships, right? Connections,
Absolutely.
relationships, community. We can say it a bunch of different ways. It has and will continue to be, to your point, Carlos, how so many young people go through this decision-making process. So then 3 years later, right, we get to 2020 and we're 8 months into a global pandemic, and you decide, it's time to move into a leadership role now at a different institution. Walk us through, how that happened and just what led you to believe yep, this is, with everything that's happening in the world and where I'm at in my career, this is the right move for me?
I have been very fortunate in my career that the moves that I've made have not been out of necessity, but they've been because someone either said, I think you're the right person for this job. I want you on my team. Word of mouth, people. And during the pandemic, we know there was a lot of movement, and there still continues to be a lot of movement within the world of higher education, and particularly within admissions and enrollment. And so it was a situation where Georgian Court had a need. People were doing their due diligence and trying to find, okay, who can we get that is someone that's someone trustworthy, that's someone that's reliable, that we can get here to make an immediate impact. And I applied to Georgian Court University, director of admission communications and marketing. I was certainly in a position where I was a little apprehensive because it was a director role. It would have been, it became my first one. And it almost got to a point where my wife told me as I was going through the decision making process, she says to me, Carlos, what do you keep harping about? You're looking at this point for more reasons to not to make this move than there are. Like, there really aren't any reasons for you not to do this other than, yes, you're in the middle of a pandemic. So what does that really mean? But at the end of the day, any transition that you make is always going to involve a little bit of a gamble, and it's always going to involve a little bit of risk. And so I had this opportunity in front of me. I did think about it long and hard, but it was the right choice for me to make. Again, at the time, given where I was from a personal standpoint in terms of my career, I said, you know what? Opportunities like this don't come up very often. And they also made it very difficult for me to say no. Right. And so that also led me to really believe and think that, okay, they really want me. For one reason or another, I don't know why, but they really want me at Georgian Court. And I went ahead and took the deep dive.
Well, and it feels great to be wanted, right? I don't think any of us would argue that. It does get me thinking, though, right? You talk about multiple opportunities you've had in your professional higher ed career to make those moves. It's not, well, I'm just randomly going to a job board and finding these jobs. People who are reaching out to me. How much do you truly feel like those opportunities are in part because of how either A, active you've been within NACAC and especially the New Jersey ACAC over the years, and or B, the social media presence? Because again, in my opinion, you're one of the most active admissions and EM people on social media that I know. Any connection there in your opinion?
Oh, 1000% on both ends. I was fortunate enough to, in 2013, I became involved with the New Jersey Association for College Admission Counseling.
How'd that happen, by the way, Carlos?
I was voluntold to a position. So I went to the conference for the first time. Again, that was an experience that kind of blew my mind because I didn't, again, so early in my career, I didn't know that there were these events where you would get together with other people that do the same work that you do, or in that same world with you, because you have secondary school counselors and independent counselors and whatnot. They're all in the same place and they're all talking about the same things, right? And especially on the college side, to me it was, wow, like we're all in the same room and these are my competitors and people that I'm trying to get students from, right? But it was so collaborative and it was so powerful. And then, at least back then, everything's online now, but I remember back then specifically filling out a piece of paper, because I've always been that person. I was always like that in undergrad, where it was like, okay, we have this thing we want you to do, or hey, sign up for intramurals, or sign up to do the clothing drive, or whatever it was. And I always signed up. And even if it was being super involved or just having a small role, I always wanted to be involved. And I said, okay, this is the time to do it now in a professional setting. So I filled out that sheet of paper that said, okay, I'm interested in this and this and this. And all of a sudden I get an email that says, okay, you need to be here for our summer retreat. And I'm like, what am I getting myself into? But at the same time, I was like, okay, why not? Like, if this is a way for me to be able to meet people that, again, are doing the same work as I am, and we're able to collaborate together, then why not? And because I've always believed that in many regards, it's not always about what you know, it's about who you know as well. And so through that, I became very involved, especially then got to become a delegate for NACAC, which then brought me to the national level and the national conference. And the social media stuff, shouts to EM Chat, shouts to Alex Williams and Jenny L. Struther, who I came across EM Chat on a whim. I honestly don't remember how it came about, but I suppose probably from something I tweeted that was work related. And all of a sudden I'm getting tweets with hashtag EM Chat. And I'm like, what is this? And then all of a sudden I'm getting connected with people like you, JT, and Adam Castro. And just, again, there's so many names that are in there. And then all of a sudden, finally meeting people like that in real life, having these conversations about the work that we do, and it's just been great. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to have, and to be able to run ideas past people like yourself. We've had conversations in the past many times about different things, whether it's with staff or with communications or whatnot. And all of those things have been great, and they have been a significant influence on my career and where I've gotten to up to this point.
Well, and to that point, Carlos, I would argue younger, again, admissions professionals, whether you're voluntold like you were, or you have this opportunity, or even if you don't, for budget, for timing, for whatever it is, we all have access to social media. Hashtag EM Chat is still a thing. Shout out absolutely to Jenny L and Alex, who are two of the most amazing humans just like you in the world, who I'm happy to call good friends, Adam Castro as well. There are just opportunities to connect with people. I tell people all the time, I literally did it this morning with, ironically, somebody that is a mutual friend of ours who works at a school in New Jersey as well. And she's just getting an opportunity to expand her leadership role right now. And she said, hey, Jeremy, do you know anybody I can connect with who can? Absolutely. And I've already put her in contact with somebody that is available to every single person listening to this, regardless of whether you're in an enrollment comms role, an admissions counselor role, a vice president role. There are all kinds of people doing the same thing you're doing right now. And I don't think enough people are intentional about doing what you clearly did. When you start in that leadership journey, what did you prioritize as a new leader?
My biggest priority when I started as a director, and it's funny because even before I started, I was thinking to myself, how do I now take this really bold step as a director to really distinguish myself to my new colleagues and my new coworkers? So one of the things that I did was went on a listening tour, really, within my office. I met with every member of our staff, including our vice president, who I report to, our assistant vice president for undergraduate, director for graduate, all the admissions counselors on both sides of the house. Sat with them 30, 45 minutes and asked them super simple questions like, hey, what would you like to see from someone who's in my role? What do you think my predecessor did that worked, that didn't work? Things that you would like to see continue, things that maybe just didn't work, and so we need to go in a different direction. But more importantly, was getting their feel as to the campus culture. Again, it was a really interesting time just because of the pandemic, and so we weren't in the office as much. The campus community wasn't as lively and as active, but I wanted to hear from all sides of the proverbial table. People on my staff who have been there for 30 plus years, so they're very, very connected to the institution in a different way. And then folks who are a little bit younger, but also connected because they're alum, or they've been there maybe 5 or 6 years. So really just kind of getting the full scope of what's going on and what's needed, and then being able to pick out what's what, right? Because you certainly hear consistent messages from folks when you ask consistent questions. And so when you get that consistent feedback, you're able to then take that and say, aha, this is something that we definitely need to touch on and definitely have to have an impact on in some way, shape, or form. Also, having that open door policy, like, look, how do I help you to help me? And how can you help me to help you? That's really what it was. And I think that's very important when you start out, especially in a position where you have that title of director, which I think means that people look at you in a slightly different way.
So you've talked a lot in this time we've been chatting, CC, about mentors. Just anybody listening, talk about the importance of having one or more mentors.
It is so important. And in hindsight's always 2020, right? But in hindsight, if I don't have that conversation with my mentor, who basically said very bluntly, you need to go back to school. Like it or not, you got to go back to school because you are way too talented and way too good at this work to just kind of pigeonhole yourself into where you are right now. And so that in itself makes that relationship very important. I think it's also understanding that a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be someone that you talk to all the time or that you even see all the time. So I think, and I know in my head, that there are people that I consider mentors that are not necessarily people, who may not even know I consider them a mentor, but B, are also just not people that I talk to all the time, but I still really feel that they're mentoring me, whether it's through their example, through words that they share directly or indirectly. I always think about one person who I consider a mentor, Sigus Vanni, who is a legend in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. He's an independent counselor who I've known for many, many years now. And it's his way of telling stories that has always inspired me to be that storyteller. Because when he talks about the experiences that he had as a college student, the experiences that he's had counseling students for many years in a public school setting, and now what he gets to do as an independent counselor, it just has meant so much to me in my career. And I consider him a mentor. And I don't think that I've ever told him that. I probably should.
You 100% should.
And I definitely should. But again, it's someone that I talk to maybe once every couple of months, if that, or we see each other at a conference or something like that. And so anyone that's listening to this, if you haven't identified that someone, and again, it doesn't have to be someone that you talk to all the time or that you see all the time, but it is so important that you have that someone that you draw inspiration from and that you also are able to get something beyond just the normal conversation banter, right? I think that's one of the things that helps define a mentor, is that they provide some form of inspiration as well. And the folks that I call mentors in my life definitely have done that for me.
The last two things we do on every episode, CC, a signature question. What's been the most influential resource for you in your career?
Most influential resource for me has always been my network of people. And again, it isn't because I'm able to name drop and say, oh, I know so and so. It's the ability to be able to send a tweet to you, for example, and say, hey, JT, what do you think about this? The fact that I know that I can send a message on LinkedIn to somebody in at another institution and be able to pose a question. I did it just recently as I'm doing some research on a product, and I saw the client list and I said, oh, I know someone there and I know someone there, and I know that I can pick their brain about this particular venture that I may want to go on. And so that's been my biggest resource, 1000%.
Last thing we do is something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a handful of quick things and I want to get your quick takes. You ready?
Absolutely.
Wrestler with the best walkout music.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
That's a pretty good one. You have to give up one for the rest of your life. Soccer or wrestling? Which one are you giving up?
Wrestling. That's so hard. That's not even fair.
Marvel or DC?
DC. Batman all day.
Most underrated video game?
Metal Gear Solid.
I have no idea what that is. And then fun fact that not too many people know about you.
I am a 4th Dan black belt in Taekwondo.
Carlos, it's so fun that we got to do this. Long overdue, my friend. And I appreciate you being willing to open up and share so much. I have no doubt it's going to help a ton of our audience. If anybody does want to follow up with you and connect, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is LinkedIn. You can find me right by my name, Carlos Cano. And then on Twitter, at EMCarlosC. Those are the 2 best ways to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
JT, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jeremy Tiers. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at Enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at Enrollify.org.